Welcome everyone to another episode of Women Like Us. My name is Nancy John, and as always, I am your host and facilitator for today's conversation. Our discussion today is on a topic that is actually really prevalent, I find now, but it probably has been in the last several years as well. And it's specifically around the conversation of the underrepresentation of women in STEM, both from a field of study as well as work. And so what we want to do today in the conversation is to talk about what are the implications, what challenges are coming up, and of course talk about what are some solutions and ideas that might come forward from the panel today. As always, joining us is our regular panel of the lovely ladies, Lisa, Sarah, and Esther. So welcome to you to another episode. We have a couple of guest panelists joining us. We have Helen and Maria. So I want to welcome you both as well on Women Like Us.
Maria, I'm currently a consultant at a Fortune 500 tech company. And I actually started my education in a different area of STEM. So I did my undergrad at McGill in physiology, and then I did a master's in experimental medicine. And then so pivoted from the sciences to technology. And I'm happy to be here. I think the discussion today is going to be really interesting.
I'm a AVP of Strategic Business Development and the Marketing Actuary at Sun Life. I have never pivoted. I actually always was only good at one thing, which is math. So that kind of steered me into being an actuary. So I've been an actuary for my entire career. But now that I'm marketing, I'm kind of half in, dealing out in the outside, dealing with clients. So people don't really expect that of an actuary who's typically hiding behind the desk.
And so I want to start with just understanding what got you interested in the field of STEM and actually continue in it, maintain that interest. So Lisa, if you want to kick us off.
So I would say I fell into IT. I was never groomed, encouraged, promoted, any career opportunities going through high school or post-secondary. In fact, in high school, they pushed me towards social sciences, so like social worker type of things. And I didn't like that. And when I got to college, I took accounting. I did that, but didn't like it. I found it a little boring. And I got a job at IBM kind of by accident. And then that is what fostered my love and interest into IT. And really for me, the thing that's kept me grounded in IT is it's the application of it to real life, my day-to-day life, the future of our society, our community. Those things keep me interested in IT and the impact that it has.
Yeah. Thank you. What about you, Helen?
So as a child, I was always an average student, but I was always good in math. So when I was applying for university, I'm surrounded by a family of engineers, as well as an aunt and uncle who are actuaries. So I thought I'd try for actual science because I didn't have the marks for engineering. So I kind of fell into that. I call myself a late bloomer. So I think my marks gradually got better and I had the confidence. So I did eventually become an actuary and wrote all the exams, which I probably failed more than I passed, but you got to persevere and keep at it. And being an actuary, I'm now enjoying it so much more because I had the background to do that kind of work, which wasn't very interesting. But now I'm in a role where I get to apply that, but still be out there and do the things I get to enjoy with that background. That really helped me.
See, both of your stories have the love that comes from the application side of it. Like you're able to now see how this applies to something bigger. That's awesome. Maria, you said you kind of started in one place, went somewhere else, and kind of came through to where you are now. So share a little bit about that.
I'm a child of the 90s. I grew up on the Magic School Bus, and that show really made science cool. And so really, I mean, both elementary school and high school, I was good at school. I liked sciences a lot. I was good at physics and math, but they as subjects didn't kind of interest me. I thought the human body was super cool, and everything to do with it was really interesting. So when it came to deciding, what I wanted to do in university and later on in life, it almost made sense to be a doctor. Like you get the benefit of working with people and helping others and doing something that's good. It's a stable and secure job in my parents' view. And so naturally I, gravitated towards that in university. And once I got to university, reality really hits you. And not everybody gets the opportunity to go into med school. It doesn't really matter, if you're smart or if you're capable. There's really 1% that kind of gets to do that. So I decided, after having applied a couple times, as much as I loved it and science was a passion of mine, I didn't intend on spending the rest of my life trying to apply for this position. And I didn't want to be a student, for the next 30 years. So I pivoted, and similar to Lisa, I kind of fell into the tech world by chance. Growing up, I thought tech and what my parents did was extremely boring. But I happened to join this company at a time where they were sort of intersecting my love for science with technology. And I'm now in a role where I still get to work with people and help them. It's just in a different way.
Of, what you want to do, what you love to do, plus the kind of like that logical side that kicks in, what gets you a job and what's realistic. So I think all of that plays into the journey. Thanks for sharing that. What about you, Sarah?
Like everyone here, it seems, just fell into it. I didn't have any real guidance. In high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. That didn't work out. I didn't get into law school. I graduated with a degree in criminology and psychology. And when I was home for the summer, the only guidance I had was get a job. And that's it. And so my dad is he's in IT project management. He's made an amazing career for himself. My mom is an entrepreneur. And so I got connected with a friend, my dad's friend, and they put my resume in at IBM, and I got in. The real question is, why did I stay? Because I had zero interest, natural ability, or any affinity to technology. Why I stayed was when I got into sales, which is really my forte, I guess you could say, I turned out to be just really good at it, apparently. And it didn't matter what I was selling. It could have been selling pizza boxes. Well, I really was pizza box servers, but I ended up just teaching myself through the enablement and education at the company. And it was okay enough and held my interest enough, but it was more the people around me that kept me in technology. And now I understand how important it is to our society, especially now going through this pandemic. It's so essential. It feels good that I'm here now, and I'm thankful that I was able to just fall into this and make it a really successful career.
It's your story, Esther.
So how I got into STEM is really interesting because it was at a threat. As Helen can appreciate, being in the Asian Pacific community, we get threatened by our parents in the context of, what would you like to be when you grow up? Would you like to be a doctor or a lawyer? Which category would you like? And so I remember to this day being locked up in my room with the lights off until I memorized my timetables, 2 grades above and beyond what the capabilities are for that age group. Now, fast forward, post University of Waterloo, post co-op, post getting a job, I actually thank my father for doing that. But at that time, probably not as thankful. And it led me to liking math to the point where I liked what I was good at. So I wasn't necessarily passionate and loving math for the sake of math, but the fact that I got 90s, slam dunk. I mean, it was amazing just becoming that superstar in math, and the challenge that it gave me, and being number one. I just wanted to be that all through high school. And I went to a arts high school. So if you know, and Maria can appreciate, the left brain, right brain complementary on science, math, engineering, that complements the artistic side of, and I can't remember which part of the brain is which, but it doesn't have alignment, and the artistic side is also complementary to the the STEM side. I went into music, but I knew graduating from high school that I knew I was not a virtuoso violinist nor pianist. So that brain, the STEM brain said, you really need to make money to be able to live. And so knowing that you're not going to be able to become the concert violinist, you might need to kind of angle yourself on the STEM side, and went into technology after going through about 5 different co-op jobs, and predominantly in a tech company. So segued into tech that way.
Some of your story just lines up for me too. I'm just like the memorization of times table. Like I 100% recall doing this.
Yeah, it's not just the Asian Pacific. It's not just the Asian Pacific.
No. I had
It
a
wasn't a dark room, but it was there.
I was gonna say, did your father bring you back math books from like the Balkans, 2 grades above you, so that you could do extra homework?
I had to do that actually. My mom would go to Scholar's Choice and buy those math books and grammar books.
My goodness.
Make my brother and me do extra math and grammar.
Yeah, summertime for us was why are you just sitting around? Like go read this and write a report, or like what the heck is this? Like it was so I totally relate. Obviously the rest of us do as well. I guess simply I'm wondering, like, what were some of the challenges? So obviously not having guidance would perhaps you might consider that to be a challenge along the way, but maybe a couple of you can speak to challenges in that pursuit or in that journey that you were going through in staying within the field.
I was what I'll call decent in math. I didn't have anybody in my high school say, hey, why don't you do more of this? There was no encouragement from guidance counselors, teachers, my parents that would say, this could be something that you could actually explore because you have some sort of interest / ability. And so because it was never identified to me, I didn't really understand what I could do with that. And so when I think about guidance, I just didn't know. And I wonder how much that happens to other young girls, is that unless they are told or marketed to or encouraged, or there's some sort of program that they can go into, STEM is just going to fall off.
That notion of marketing to young girls is important. So take, for example, me, I loved sciences. I was good at it. It was something that I did, both at an undergrad level and then as a master's. Unfortunately, it was, well, if you don't get into med school, then what's left for me to actually apply my degree to? I don't want to go into, a lab setting where I'm working by myself. It's not necessarily a very rewarding job. So what else is out there for me? And I think being able to, present girls, really present any kid in elementary school or high school with, these are your options. If you're interested in STEM and this is what you like to do and what you're good at, this is what you can do afterwards. Like, I had no idea that jobs like what I do today, or what any of us really do, existed out there. So it's hard to want to do those things if you don't actually know about them.
Great point in terms of understanding the real world application of things like science and math and technology. I agree, with Sarah in terms of not the guidance part of the guidance counseling, I think needs real experience. I think guidance counselors need to have worked in science. I think they need to have done some physics. I think they need to have worked in IT companies, because it's easier to reach a young child in grade school or high school, when you can say, here's what I did. Universities do this really well. Most universities professors had a career prior to them being professors, and or are still work that career while they're still professors. And so they can draw on their experiences that, for me anyways, allows the opportunities to be better represented. I think the other part is the marketing aspect. we rely a lot on public sector organizations and private sector organizations to be focused on STEM and investing in STEM. But there's a lot of marketing that I think can be done at home and in our, local or immediate communities. You know, I encourage my peers to say, if you're giving gifts to kids for the Christmas, you can give a fun gift that's STEM related, right? Go get a KiwiCo type engineering thing and do that for your Christmas gift and make it a theme. Like, all the kids kind of get that. There's a form of marketing, and I'd love to hear what Helen has to say about this, that you can reach kids that are outside of the traditional norms, that empower the local community in your immediate circle of friends to keep that interest alive. You don't have to tell them they have to be doctors. You don't have to tell them they have to be engineers, but keep a diverse set of interests in those areas alive and use that, because your kids see you, they see your friends and families and their friends and families a lot more.
Your idea of giving out gifts that. So I would always look up the Mensa board games. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Blockus or things where you have to use your brain, which are just luck. So that's just one thing. But I think another thing is that we can encourage girls to study STEM, but they don't think it's fun. So it's kind of hard to market it when today parents are saying, yeah, if you don't like it, you don't have to do it, or follow your passion, but you're 18 years old and you want to be a dancer, but do you think you want to be a dancer 10 years from now? So do you think we should be saying things like that? So how do we encourage these girls to study STEM when they're like, even me, I didn't even know what an actuary was, but I only went into it because my aunt and uncle were. And even at the time I'm going, this is boring. Right. Studying mortality tables and even when I was working, this is boring, right? But I just kept at it and I finally found something that I enjoyed, but still could apply that. So I think it could take you a while before you steer towards what you love. But STEM is practical.
I want to maybe jump us forward then to the conversation around like closing the gap, because I feel that's some of what we've already started here around what might be marketing to parents, starting at a young age. So I am curious, like, one, what are your thoughts on how do we go about bridging the gap, like for this, this underrepresentation of women? And I want us to maybe separate it out. Like, let's perhaps talk about it from like an education perspective. There might be ideas from a hiring perspective and others. So there's a little bit of like this marketing side that's come up as well. So there's different things. And it's interesting because I feel like there's also the component of a progression in learning, which I feel is what you've brought up, Helen, is this idea that how do we keep it progressive rather than the idea that, there's this pressure to figure out what do you want to do when you grow up, when you're like 15, 16 years old and you're like, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up, and think about what you all thought you were going to be doing versus where you are now and where you might be even 10 years from now, right? So I feel like there's that progressive component as well. So I want to just share something so this was a recent study that was done by Statistics Canada. And it was a study that was around the persistence and representation of women and men in STEM fields over the course of their undergraduate studies. And so a small piece of that says, a commonly used metaphor is that of leaks in the STEM pipeline, with women being lost from the pipeline at various different points between high school and undergraduate studies, over the course of undergraduate studies, between undergraduate and graduate studies, and then between degree completion and the workforce. So incrementally, there's this drip that's happening where women kind of are lost from that pipeline. So when you think about education and you think about how we might close the gap, what are some of your thoughts? And you can, at any of those stages. So
from an early age, if we can hone in on what Helen said, because her and I were texting like last night, because the stats don't surprise us. All of us have seen it. 50% of the population is women, less than 30% globally, irrespective of what market, have women in STEM. Less than 10% are women of color in STEM. And so that hasn't changed in all likeliness for the last 10 years, I'm afraid, decade-wise. And so I'm wondering, Helen and I were texting, like, how do we make STEM cool? Like, how do I infuse, whether it's me or a company we build or those in the audience, of making STEM part of TikTok? I mean, we need to figure out how to infuse that, because I went and did a search last night on the YouTube channel, and I believe I had sent some of you this, where Gen Z had started Girls in STEM, and I got so excited I clicked on it, and it was like one video, and it was just starting up like Women Like Us channel.
Mhm.
The fact of the matter is I couldn't find anything, in the last 10 years that had a huge set of following for girls in STEM. So starting at a young age, my dilemma is, how do we make STEM cool?
I think it's also important to understand, A, where in the pipeline are women dropping off, but also where are we well represented and where are we not well represented? Because if I think back to my undergrad, I was a physiology, so your cell anatomy, kids who wanted to be doctors. We actually had more women than men enrolled in our program. And so our program was predominantly women. And so if that's true, what happened to all of those women, and kind of where did they go in the future? And I think part of it is well, their number one objective, what they wanted to be, wasn't attainable. And so I think after that, they sort of pivot away from it, and other opportunities or jobs within the STEM sector just aren't presented to them or don't seem like a natural fit, and they're not necessarily encouraged to continue pursuing it. So I think they kind of fade away. If you look at like the physics or maths, all I saw were, boys working by themselves on cars or being engineers. I didn't want to do that. Like, that didn't interest me. I liked working with people. So, to Esther's point, what do we do? How do we showcase to them that there are cool things to do within STEM that isn't just being a doctor or working on cars or one of those stereotypes?
What's interesting was that, to your point, Maria, there are a lot of females in some of those sciences at the beginning, and then along that undergraduate study, they actually shift to sciences that are not in STEM. They do continue that focus, but they're now in programs that are not considered, non-STEM fields, for lack of a better word, but they continue in the sciences because they want to be in the applied sciences. And so it's not that the science part goes away, it's just they're no longer in what's considered a STEM field.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is, as women get married and have children, and Helen is probably going to elaborate on this one as a mom and as a wife, and both of them being in STEM, the husband and the wife. In most cases, and not in Helen's, it's either or. One of them has to make a sacrifice in a lot of cases. And it may be that the gap is there and the leakage is there because in most cases, women are found to be scientifically more nurturing. Maria, you can attest to that. It's not just like focus, common sense, but the fact of the matter is if it's down to pure economics and you have two people and they want to have children in their marriage, they struggle with the fact that, okay, well, the men in STEM tend to make less than 10%, but maybe about 5 to 10% higher than the woman. And so from an economics perspective, then the woman says, okay, well, I'll figure out another job that allows me to do a little bit more multitasking or bringing up the children while you go ahead. And so I find from a lot of my friends and peers that has been their storyline. And again, that goes back to that leakage and the gap issue on continuance.
Well, I only have one kid, and it really helped having parents help you out. So if you don't have any help, I don't know if I could have done it. So if you don't have the support of people around you, I think it's hard for both parents to kind of move up and be relatively successful. And if you have more than one child, If you have 3, that makes it even tougher, right? So I have friends who have studied STEM and then they chose to stay home and raise the kids.
I have 2 views of STEM, obviously being a woman, but then also raising a minority child, which I think suffers similarly. I think there's not a lot of minorities that are, or, Black kids that are in STEM programs. So I look at it in terms of how do we keep their interest from an early age so that it becomes ingrained in their psyche about not just what are all the opportunities in terms of subjects, but how are all the different ways that you could build a life around STEM. And I've taken to doing things that I will have a trip to the Kennedy Space Station as an example, because I want my son, and I would want this for my daughter if I had a daughter, to see an example and have an experience that becomes a part of her life on what STEM could do, right? That's math, right? That's science, but it's done in a way that isn't onerous and isn't academic, if I could use that word. It isn't an academic experience. It's a real life experience that becomes a part of, grooming them on what the real opportunities of STEM could look like. I make it a point, whether it's my godchildren or my son, and I'm going to use this word deliberately, to brainwash them at an early age through these simple experiences, right? And I do mean this, right? I do building projects with my son for the purposes of getting him to understand how to apply it's a robotics engineering project. Like, I want him to learn to build something, and then I take my time and convince him of the coding ability to make that robot work. So I take the academic burden off the table, which is, I think, part of the loss of interest is making it like a job when kids just want to have fun. Right. And you can do that all the way through until they have to make that practical decision. It's eventuality. They will have to make it. But take the academic off and give them some real experiences that becomes a part of their life experience, that guides them, that word guidance again, that guides them throughout their life and makes that opportunity more subconscious.
You made it fun and fun.
No, I brainwashed them.
You tricked them.
No, yeah. But deliberately, I deliberately did that, right? Because I wanted him to go, oh, this is cool. And then in the side, I'm kind of like, oh, you know what that is? That's math. Oh, you know what that is? That's physics. Right? And start introducing those things, but again, in a non-burdensome environment.
I do that when I take my daughter shopping. Oh, it's additional 30% off. So is that better than 30, or are you better off with 50% off? That's what we do.
But Helen, that's incredibly that is a math exercise, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're teaching her financial responsibility, but you're not making an academic experience. But it's math and it's financial literacy. It's really important.
Yes.
We laugh, but it is very relevant, very practical, what you just said.
Well, you ever go into a store and the salesperson has to pull out a calculator to calculate 50% off?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Amazing. Yes.
My dad actually took that one step further, and he'd say, well, you know how much this bag costs. Do you know how much you need to earn in order to be able to buy that? And then what jobs exist out there that can give you that salary? Helen touched on it, in terms of responsibilities between her and her partner. I think the role that parents play and how, Lisa tries to encourage and foster this love for science in her kids, I think that's extremely important. And sometimes I think it's a really important, if you have 2 parents, I think it really is critical that the dad fosters that interest in girls and encourages them and teaches girls from a young age that, hey, men do see me as an equal and do see me as somebody who can do this job. Because, we as women, I think inherently are there to take care of and encourage our kids. And it's exhausting if the work always sort of falls on your shoulders. Yeah. Your partner has to really go above and beyond there. And that's something that I think my dad did a really good job of. He, didn't care if we were girls or boys. We were taught you're going to be the best at what you do and you can do it.
This idea of confidence. So I'm curious to find out from you ladies, like the role that confidence plays in this. I want to, if you don't mind, I want to read a little, just a short blurb that I feel speaks to this piece as well. One of the most common reasons for women not to persist in STEM, especially the post-secondary studies, is loss of interest in the STEM curriculum, which some studies found is related to women not self-identifying as scientists, feeling isolated or out of place in STEM classes, or not seeing STEM fields as a means to improving the lives of others. Additionally, women in STEM have lower academic self-confidence than men of equal academic ability, contributing to their departure from STEM studies. Conversely, women who strongly identify themselves as scientists or engineers are more likely to persist in STEM fields and STEM careers.
Confidence is extremely key. And I don't know where my confidence came from. I have zero IT background. Now, when I go into a room, 16 years of experience later, oh yeah, I'm super confident, and that takes me really far. I think that naturally men have and are more confident than women. From what I've read, there's a tipping point in age whereby this starts around the puberty side, where they're confident, and then early teens, they start to drop off the confidence. And I think that baggage, I'll call it a hangover, comes into play in your career. And men are the biggest self-champions, and they champion their way even if they don't have the actual skill and ability. They're like, how come? Absolutely, I can do it. And there's something about the socialization of girls and young women that takes that confidence away from them. And it does take a while in some women to build it back up. So I think it's absolutely key that we understand the impact that confidence has. And I will also say, I've never had any type of education or enablement on confidence.
Mm.
Has anybody here ever been educated on confidence?
No, I think when you're Asian, it's the other way around. Your parents kind of put you down and tell you how great their friends' kids are.
It's just not an Asian thing. It happens all the time.
I read a book called Confidence Code, and it's about how women lack confidence. So an example they gave is that if there was a job posting with 10 list of requirements, a woman feels like she has to have 9 out of 10, whereas a guy has 5. He goes, yep, I'm good, I'm going for it, right? And then I think of when my daughter was in engineering, and her first set of exams, she goes, oh, I didn't do that well, and then I go, well, it's all relative, right? And then all the guys she talked to, they go, yeah, that was no problem, right? And then when they got the results, she did better than the guys, because these guys have these false sense of confidence, but maybe it's because they didn't know what they didn't know, where she knew enough that what she missed on, that she thought she did really poorly.
I find that very interesting. What I want to know is how many women with 60% of the qualifications get hired? Yeah. Like, do men with 60% get hired? Yeah, women just don't apply, but would they get the job?
I read a really great article talking about how the concept of Girlboss was fading out, and everything that had happened this year with the pandemic and with the Black Lives Matter movement was pushing away the narrative of girl bosses and really bringing to light conversations around diversity, and not just white women trying to kind of make it in the workforce, but people of other backgrounds and colors succeeding in the workforce. Well, why are we trying to tell girls that they need to be more like guys and be, super confident, and looking at those checklists and saying, well, if I'm 50%, I'm great. Why aren't we almost kind of punishing boys sometimes and saying, hey, back off, you shouldn't be confident about this. It's great that, you want to take a chance and learn, but you're lying. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to others.
Excellent point of view, Maria. The opposite side of that is, why is it always the woman that has to fix that? And so I want to go back to, it's related to the question that Nancy's asking, is what about the confidence part? Well, the confidence part is, I'm not a psychologist, so I, caveat that by saying there are enough of my experiences and the experiences of my friends that say women, either in school, maybe sometimes at home, definitely in the workplace, are always coached on how to make themselves more acceptable.
Mm.
And let's just say my experience might inform Maria, just as an example. I might have been coached on how to, talk differently. And Maria might see that, and that informs her self-esteem and her confidence. But nobody ever says to the dude, could you please stop man-sprawling at the table? Because it's disruptive to the girl that's sitting beside you. There's no expectation of a change in behavior on that other side of the coin.
Yeah.
It's always singularly the responsibility. And that's actually a pervasive, I'm going to call it a pervasive attitude. It's the woman that sacrifices and stays home, right? It's the woman that carries the child. It's the woman that has to prove herself always. And that's not just the psyche of, say, myself, but it's the people that are younger than me or younger than Esther watching me, seeing that. And there's a trickle down effect of that that affects the psyche, the self-esteem, and therefore the confidence. And Maria, I think, hit the nail on the head. I think we have to change the conversation to say, you over there, your 50% is not her 80%, get lost. I think Maria's got a really good perspective that I think should probably start being a big focus of STEM conversations.
So then let's talk about that employment side, the hiring side, right? So what would need to shift to actually even have that conversation? Because who owns creating the agenda of those conversations right now? And how do we shift that?
We can do a lot more on the HR and hiring side for all companies, whether public sector or private sector. And I believe our programs are honed in at the college university end of things. I don't see a lot of programs where they actually start the STEM program and reinforcement of companies who want to foster that at a younger age, right? So where I saw that in the US while I was traversing globally amongst a bunch of financial industry customers was T. Rowe Price. And they wanted to foster, both from a competitive perspective, but also being able to find out how to engage with the Gen Z because they were being beaten out by the Wealthsimple, by Robinhood, and all the financial sector startups that were being brought up who knew how to engage in the social media era. So they did a lot to do with programs going straight into the elementary schools to make, as Helen and Maria, what we were saying, which is making STEM fun and using gamification to figure out how kids think in context to financial management. And they actually had an entire department go into coding a game so that video games becoming that much more pervasive nowadays that they can reach out sooner than later with that engagement model. And so I believe all the companies, irrespective of what industry, just need to put a little bit more autonomous ownership on that, because I suspect their personal agenda is, I want to hire someone next year, not necessarily I'm thinking of fostering somebody and a child for 20 years down the line, right? They're thinking about the immediate requirements that they have.
Another thing is that when people are hiring, they tend to hire people like themselves. They may not be aware of that, but a white man's more likely to hire a white man that came from his university or something, right? So, but they don't realize that having that varying opinions and people who are diverse from you actually you get a bigger picture and you're able to come up with better solutions that way.
Injecting diversity across all businesses, beyond HR, leadership, and so on. And I wonder if this has happened to the panel here. Have you ever gotten a role and not been supported? And I'm asking the question in this way is because women in order for us to make any type of impact we have to get to the senior levels of a company. You have to be a part of the culture. You have to be able to be at the table to actually make change. So you have to get there. Are we really being supported and brought up? And this is a bit of the sponsorship conversation. But I'm curious to know, anybody here, have you been given an opportunity and then it's almost oh, well, I gave you a stretch and now you have to live up to my expectations, and almost a hold down, versus I'm going to help make you super, super successful and bring you down a path?
Goes to Helen. She missed one of our first segments when I talked about people wanting to see their reflection in the mirror. So Helen, either you watched the segment or great minds think alike. Esther brought up the whole engagement model between corporations and academics, from K to 12 type of academics. But there's the same type of engagement that needs to happen internally in corporations to do what Sarah is suggesting, which is to create a legitimate, orchestrated path of success in STEM in public sector and private sector. Corporations are outcome driven. They have a metric, they've got a target, and they are happy to meet that metric. But the outcome for them is just to meet the metric. They check the box on the metric, but they forget about the intention of that metric. And that's what Sarah's talking about, is rather than having a young person in a role or having a person who's an actuary in the role, it's what's that path for that person to be successful, tied to those very outcome driven items that corporations are typically fueled by. We all have the experience where you're picked, but that pick has to be lined up to something larger, greater, more well thought out. And I think corporations need to move to that model now, rather than checking the box for the sake of checking the box.
What are your thoughts on what might it look like? A woman who's, let's say, not a Gen Z, but let's say either a very, very early stage, millennial. So usually like those are folks who are their late 30s to early 40s at this point. What might that look like? Because that's also an opportunity that exists. I'm curious what thoughts you have on that.
Coaching. I think it's important for us all to be coaching. I love when I talk to Esther, it's about giving back, right? And part of our growth is that it's important to have someone in your life who can coach you, mentor you, and as well as advocate for you. You can't go around just promoting yourself. You need someone to speak on your behalf to say, hey, she's doing a great job too. So in our careers, whenever someone says, oh, so-and-so wants to be an actor, wants to find out about it, can you talk to her or Tim or whatever? Yes, I always say yes, because we have to be there to volunteer, because we need to help these younger people who have no idea of all the things that's available for them out there.
We talk about this leakage that's happening from girls moving from STEM into, law or other fields. I personally think, and when we talk about diversity, we always talk about, the color of our skin or our background. I think diversity of thought is really lacking in STEM. And so start poaching back those girls who are lawyers or who are in, marketing or HR companies, and start bringing them to the STEM groups, because we need people who think differently. We need art students and history students who know how to communicate well and who think differently, so that we can relate to others differently. And it goes beyond just subjects, but go to your community colleges. Like, I'm so tired of going to recruiting events where every student is a business student who's doing their MBA and is from one of like 5 universities, who, grew up in middle to higher income families and lived a very cushy lifestyle and did 1,000 different volunteering opportunities. Like, bring in other kids, bring in kids who might have gone to York or gone to a community college like Sheridan College, who have a different experience. And I think then diversity will actually have a big impact on your company.
But we need to temper that with the reality. The reality is companies are hiring jobs with skills and requirements that they want filled quickly and easily. I have an example where just the other day, I referred a woman colleague of mine, super bright, MBA educated, AVP level from an insurance company. I referred her into my company, and it's a technology firm. She has a background in consulting. She has background in leadership. She is extremely educated. She is Iranian, and she's a woman. The response from the recruiter was, "You're great. I'm concerned you don't have the technology experience."
Wow.
What are we talking about here? People want the easy way. They want the easy choice. Diversity may check a box, but that's a secondary box. And we need to call it out almost. Like those recruiters, guys, in this case, it was a guy. Hey, you want to not attract women into technology? Tell them that they're lacking on technology skills.
Right.
Don't do that. It can be learned.
Example.
Everything can be learned. If you have the capacity and the willingness, you can do anything. But you are leaving a very important diversity of thought, to Maria, your point, on the table here. You're leaving that for what? Something a bit easier for you because you're scared or it's too much of a stretch in your mind. It's a problem and it's happening. It's very, very real.
Let's wrap up this panel conversation with what we like to call our gotcha questions. These are those sensitive questions that you might not feel comfortable posing to your own leaders. But here at Women Like Us, we want to encourage and create a space for exactly those types of conversations. So listen in as our panelists respond to some of these more sensitive questions. One question that I'm actually curious about, and it's around our focus, our entire conversation was around underrepresentation of women in the area of STEM. And so a question that might come is, well, why should we care about underrepresentation in STEM as compared to other lucrative, influential areas, careers where women are also underrepresented? Like, we can look at politics, we can look at lawyers, we can look at tradespeople. All of these are important. So why care about STEM as compared to these?
STEM's, I think, where a majority of the high earning jobs are. And money brings you power and gives you the ability to make decisions. And we can't, I'll be honest, I think women are a lot better than men are. I think we have the ability to be a lot more successful in our jobs. We communicate better for the most part. So I think we absolutely should be confident and stand up and be able to say, no, like I'm better than you are, and I'm going to do a great job. And we can't afford to give up the high earning and the powerful positions to men just because, we lack confidence or we didn't get the guidance we needed when we were in school. Because the way the world's working is more and more jobs are going to be in the STEM fields, and we can't afford to lose out on those.
STEM is where all the future jobs will be, while others will be displaced by robots, AI, right? So STEM is a future for men and women. So why not try to steer more women into it?
You need to then start introducing them to other employment opportunities that make society, like our sustainable for society. We need more doctors, we need biochemists, we need mathematicians, we need robotics engineering. Like that is the next thing. I'm trying to convince my son to open up a refurbished robotics plant. Like, get that robotics engineer, get the engineering one as a backup, and open up a manufacturing plant. I'm connecting all of those things together because the odds of doing what we've traditionally done before is minimal.
If we can talk about incentives, I don't believe we hit on that yet in context to the impact of money. And I don't believe I need to say it more than that. Is we had all kind of attributed some of this in our previous replies and responses, but it is a realist factor that based on money, you get to have a level of freedom, a level of choice level of flexibility that you may need for your lifestyle. I don't necessarily mean that everybody needs to want to be a Bill Gates, Warren Buffett. The fact of the matter is it's a black and white formula. And if you need that Prada bag, you're going to have the rightful job, as we were saying, and Maria pointed that out earlier, is you're going to have to make the alignment of what type of jobs provide for that. In my case, it may be that you now launch into a philanthropic perspective. And I want to be able to give back in that manner. But a lot of people are focused on their necessities and their family requirements and their friends in that surrounding. If you have a philanthropic motivation and inspiration to go and do some of that, that also takes money. So I'm not necessarily saying if you have material desires, this is what you're going to need. It's also philanthropic and other desires you might have to have a well-fulfilled life. What is your purpose-driven life? And to getting there, you need the money and the appropriate job to drive you there. If you can, those become dreams and it never gets fulfilled.
Sometimes when we think about money, it becomes very singularly about a gaining of wealth just to promote myself. But I loved what you said, Esther, is like that money, looking at money not for itself, but to like the money is a means to something else.
I think we're in a very unique position because every single woman here is aware and well paid, I think. And it's almost changing the way that we speak to other women to say, hey, it's okay to want to make a lot of money. And you can make a lot of money yourself.
Yeah. On that note, I want to say thank you to all of you for just an amazing conversation. The questions that you brought up as well were great. Helen, Maria, thank you for joining us on today's.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah, we're excited to have this launch, and just want to thank everyone who's been listening in as well. As always, if you see value in what's being shared here, please comment, please like, and please share it with other people in your circle as well. Invite others into the conversation. And on that note, Lisa, Sarah, Esther, as always, thank you for joining.
Thank you for moderating. Thanks everyone out there.